Howdy. This is Grey Pilgrim. No guns today. Today, we're going to talk books. Sorry, guys, but this is kind of important. If you're studying firearms or swords or catapults or cannon or belt-fed machine guns or whatever your interest, they're all implements of war. And that means you got to know something about the subject of war. Well, there's one book everyone should read, and I mean everyone. And this is it. Sun Tzu's The Art of War. I've read this book at least once every year for the last 40 years. 40 years. It is just absolutely vital to understand. Sun Tzu says, war is a matter of vital importance to the state, the province of life or death, the road to survival or ruin. It is mandatory that it be thoroughly studied. Therefore, appraise it in terms of the 5 fundamental factors and make comparison of the 7 elements later named, so you may assess its essentials. Now, the first of these factors is moral influence, the second is weather, the third terrain, the fourth command, and the 5th doctrine. Now, the way Sun Tzu is written is it's his statement followed by later philosophers putting their comments in between. And here he's describing what each of these means. Moral influence, I mean that which causes the people to be in harmony. By weather, I mean the interactions of natural forces. By terrain, I mean distance, whether the ground is traversed with ease or difficulty. By command, I mean the general quality of wisdom. By doctrine, I mean organization, control, assignment, or appropriate rank to officers. If you say which ruler possesses moral influence, which commander is the moral able, which army attains the advantage of nature, and the terrain in which regulation and instructions are carried out, which troops are the stronger. Sun Tzu was a general in the Warring States period. The Warring States period in China was about 400 some odd to about 200 some odd BC. And during that, there were 3 or 4 kingdoms in what is now modern China. And one of them was the state of Wu. And Sun Tzu was a general in the state of Wu. By the way, Sun Tzu, his first name was Tzu, and his last name was Sun. That's the way Chinese names are. You see a fellow with a name like Deng Xiaoping. Well, Deng is his actual surname. Well, Sun is his surname. And Sun Tzu had several ancestors who were also generals, so several of them wrote commentaries on his work. This is so important that I happen to have a pocket edition of it that I carry around with me. And if I'm stuck in an airport or a waiting room or at the dentist or wherever, I whip this out and I start reading. And I've read this so many times. As you can see, it's kind of dog-eared. Anyway, once you have a fairly good rounding of information from Sun Tzu, you should start studying some of the others. I was looking for a book that had, it's called The Roots of Strategy. And Roots of Strategy is the works of Clausewitz, Maurice Deak, Frederick the Great's Advice to My Generals, and the amanuensis of Napoleon Bonaparte, discussing his works. It's basically Napoleon's memoirs as dictated to his secretary. And the only one I could find other than that was Clausewitz. Clausewitz is much later. Maurice Deak, he was the bastard son of an elector, I think, of Bavaria. But he became a marshal of France and was pretty instrumental in several of the main campaigns of the wars that France was in the 1500s. He wrote a book. Well, actually, what happened was he was in the siege of a particular stronghold, and he came down with some illness that was almost took his life. And while laying in bed recovering, he recited to his secretary his secrets of battle. He was a general. And the one thing that Maurice Deak really contributed was he revived the art of marching in cadence. That's, where everybody, you're one, you're two, you're one, you're two, like that when you're marching. That's marching in cadence. And how you don't do it on a bridge. The one he learned that from was a Roman general of the late Empire period whose name was Bitchute. And his work on war is also well worth reading. Anyway, when through with all of that, get your Clausewitz out. This was the book that Otto von Bismarck studied and based his whole concept to bring about from the Kingdom of Prussia to the German Empire. He created Germany as we know it today by doing that. And it was based on Clausewitz. Clausewitz he's not as straightforward as Sun Tzu. He's pedantic, very German, and kind of depressing, but very insightful. And if you're not into reading such rather heavy drivel, do read Sun Tzu. But one thing I thought might be kind of fun is this one. Best Sci-Fi of the 20th Century, Military Sci-Fi. And it's just from, I think it's from the magazine of Science Fiction or something. But it's a collection of many writers. I've read most of these. I've read all these, but I've read other books by, like David Drake. David Drake is really good. He took, for instance, the history of Byzantium under Justinian. What is his name? I forget the name of his biographer, who wrote two excellent books. One's called the History of Byzantium, and the other's called The Secret History of Byzantium. The Secret History is really quite good. Anyway, but he took it and put it, instead of in Byzantium, he put it on another planet, and with some interesting characters, and it's a mercenary team that pulls this off, and it basically tells the tale of the Constantinople Nika riots, which you don't know about, but if you read his story about it, you'll find out about. But it's worth knowing about. Nika riots was basically, it started out as a chariot race. Chariot racing was to the old Byzantians what football is to modern America. And there were two main teams. One was called the Blues and the other was the Greens. And there was one faction that supported the Blues and another faction that supported the Greens. And what happened was, several things happened, but actually the Blues and the Greens got together and said, the emperor is full of it, and we got to take him out. And the riot was based on the Greek word for a victory, which is Nika, and that's classic Greek. And what happened was that all the people they gathered in the main stadium, the Circus Maximus, and what happened was they were all shouting Nika, Nika, which means victory. But what they were talking about was, bring us the emperor and we'll behead him, and that'll be that, and we'll get somebody else to run the show. Well, Justinian was in his palace, and his queen Isadora, I think is her name, basically said, now, first of all, Isadora had been a dancer, basically a whore, who Justinian had married when he was much older and she was much younger. And it was his trophy wife. And she basically said, I worked my way up to this, and no, you're not going to just slink off into the sunset and get the heck out of here. We're going to make a stand of it. So she turned to Justinian's main general, his name was Belisarius, and said, you just brought your legions back from Italy. Do something about this. Belisarius says, yes, your grace. Went out, called his captains together. They went over to the Circus Maximus, and they stationed troops all around the Circus Maximus. And then he put the rest of his legions to go into the Circus Maximus and slaughter everybody, which they did. They killed tens of thousands. And in the end, Constantinople was so stunned of the rivers of blood that they stopped rioting. They burned down many buildings and just generally had wreaked havoc upon the city. Well, Justinian took the opportunity to rebuild it. He built the Hagia Sophia, for instance, and several other big buildings there, just to replace the stuff that had been destroyed. and it became sort of a golden age of Constantinople. Anyway, books on war. There are several good ones. Read, if you can find it, find Roots of Strategy, it's called. It's 4 books, and specifically you should read Maurice Deak's, but Frederick the Great is also good. Frederick the Great was he was an emperor of Russia who had traveled the West in disguise, learned a whole lot, and decided that he would project that or practice that on his own generals and his own military, which was pretty hidebound and tradition ruined. So he wrote a book called Advice to My Generals, and it was a secret of the Russian High Command. A general, if he had a copy of Frederick's book, was told that when he died, his heirs better return that copy to the state government, that he should keep it a top secret at all times. Well, it's very insightful, and it has a lot of the things that made Frederick the Great. And it was found after, of course, his death, and was published, and it's superb. Find a copy of Roots of Strategy. It was a textbook at the War College. I don't know if it still is, but it should be. Clausewitz should be. And Sun Tzu is something that everyone should read this. Do I make myself clear? Good. Happy trails.